Good morning or afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our webinar Wednesday. My name is Stephen Phelps, and I am the marketing manager here at Acumen. For those of you who are new to our webinar Wednesdays, Acumen likes to host bi-weekly and sometimes weekly webinars on tips and tricks, review third-party products, and provide insight on the latest trends for your Sage software. Today, we are happy to have Trey Johnson and Rich Eicher from Zap to showcase the trending business intelligence solution, Sage Data and Analytics. But before I pass the mic on to them, I want to let you know that this webinar is in listen-only mode and should last around roughly 1 hour long. If you have any questions, then please write them in the chat option, and we'll answer them near the end of the presentation. We have a lot to cover today, so I will now pass it on to Trey.
Yeah, that's great, Stephen, and thank you very much. And we really do appreciate the opportunity to be here today to talk with you about Sage Data and Analytics. Not necessarily a new technology to the Sage family, but certainly a new technology to the Sage 100 and Sage 300 community. Sage Data and Analytics has gotten its start about 4.5 years ago with the Sage X3 product. And about 1.5 years ago, Sage took the decision to bring that same level of capability because of the challenges that were being understood from you as Sage 300 customers, and really mapping the capabilities of that platform into the space. So let's talk just briefly about the challenges. And so certainly there's a few different boxes on the screen here. And what we've heard very consistently from the Sage 100 and Sage 300 community is that many of you have a lot of challenges around the amount of time, the amount of effort that goes into not only the initial generation of the reports, but also the ongoing publishing of those reports, sharing that information with others, effectively bringing those reports into the decision-making processes in a timely fashion, all the while satisfying kind of a full range of requirements from users that are highly operational to more executive level decision makers that maybe are thinking a little bit more strategically about the direction of the business. And so from that perspective, what you'll see as we not only talk about, but show more with Sage Data and Analytics is the capabilities that really drive a greater magnitude of insights right away from dashboards and a variety of analytics for not only members of your management team, but also individuals throughout the organization that are operationally focused in different areas. What you'll also discover is that we're really kind of shattering some of the challenges around how do we get the information out to others in a way that's very easily consumed, can be used across a full range of devices, and really can be available to them wherever they happen to be. COVID certainly introduced the requirement to think a little bit beyond the four walls of our organization. People obviously sitting and tuning into this webinar, likely from home offices still, or from other locations beyond simply their place of work. And so that same ability to tune into this webinar should be something that's part of the entire application fabric, not the least of which is giving you data and analytics for the purposes of decision making. So the easiest way for us to really talk to and show within slides the Sage Data and Analytics capabilities is to start with the graphic on the right-hand side. And this is a very simplified view that really very succinctly shows we're connecting to principally a Sage ERP as a starting point down at the very bottom of your screen. We support not only Sage 300, but a range of other Sage products. The gray boxes that you see as well really depict the fact that we can connect to any other source of data that you might have as well. So organizationally, the ERP is likely the bigger source for information for your organization, but there's always potentially some ancillary information that lives in CRM applications, that lives in your own line of business applications that maybe are unique to your own business. Maybe it's third-party products that don't quite integrate with the ERP, or it could be external public sources of data that you would access via web services and things of that nature, all of which can be brought together by Sage Data and Analytics. And really the data part of what we do is not only that data acquisition and automating it, but also delivering for you a data platform that has all of the data that you want to report on in a single place in a very consistent manner for the purposes of reporting through a variety of different analytical means. And so out of the box, we deliver analytics for decision makers in the areas of finance, AR and AP, sales, purchasing, inventory management, but we also support that exploration down to lower levels as well. And so whether a person's focus is a dashboard or the details, they'll have that ability to get to both. And that's probably one of the more unique facets of what we do as a tool. In terms of what tends to set us apart from the technologies that maybe many of you have been working with to this point, we're automating the movement of that data. We're purposely moving beyond simply reporting off of the ERP. In doing so, we're ensuring that you have the ability to accommodate other sources of data as well, but more so takes a lot of the burden off the ERP as an application to support those queries that maybe would tend to slow down, whether you be querying from a report writer, from an Excel-based tool, or anything in between. Furthermore, within our platform, we're delivering out-of-the-box calculations. And those out-of-the-box calculations underpin all of the analytics that we deliver out of the box. And while it may not seem like much, having those out-of-the-box calculations mean that you immediately have building blocks for yourselves. So you don't have to go off and recalculate a gross profit or a number of other analytics that drive, not only the financial function, but the sales and the inventory management functions as well. SD&A is a web-delivered product that runs as a SaaS application, meaning there's no infrastructure that has to be deployed within your business by Acumen or maintained by your IT team. The benefits there is that not only can the solution itself come online literally within hours, but you also have really the best practices around connecting to Sage 100, Sage 300, and all of your other data sources automatically kept up to date via the SaaS model. Not the least of which is the fact that, as you are working today on Sage 300, you may have some views of downstream moving to another Sage ERP product. The benefit that you have as Sage Data and Analytics is one that works with all of those ERP products, and as a result allows for you to make an investment today specific to your current ERP, but also with the view that you might choose to migrate your data and reports to one of those future ERP platforms as well. So really exciting, lots of stuff that we could probably spend too much time talking to slides, which we will not do. And so as a matter of fact, I'll go ahead and invite Rich to kind of come online here and kind of lead us through a demonstration of the product. After we get through that demonstration, we'll talk a little bit more about how this is packaged up in terms of the different options that you would have as an organization, and more so would get to your questions. So as we go through the demonstration here, if you have questions, put them into the question interface, and we'll be sure to get to those before the end of the webinar. But from this point, I'll go ahead and stop sharing so Rich, you can commence, and we'll get straight into the demo.
Thank you, Trey, for that great overview. And thank you, Stephen, for having us here today. Excited to be showcasing Sage Data and Analytics for everybody. So out of the box with Sage Data and Analytics. And so we want to cover off some of the out-of-the-box dashboards and reports. The second area that I want to cover off is how do you leverage Sage Data and Analytics to build your own types of reports. There's a lot of flexibility that Sage Data and Analytics provides, and we want to kind of just give a brief taste of how you can build your own content using Sage Data and Analytics. Lastly, what I also want to talk about is distribution of the reports as well as external data sets that you can bring in. So those are the kind of the three main areas that we'll focus in on today. So let's get started. So let's talk about the out-of-the-box analytics. And I want to kind of give you just a taste and a glance of what you can expect. We'll cover it off kind of the financials and the sales. If we have some other time, we'll dig into other areas. So with Sage Data and Analytics, when it's deployed, a lot of dashboards and reports come to life. What we're doing right now is we're taking a look at the financial overview dashboard. And so this becomes live upon implementation. Now, keep in mind with all of the out-of-the-box analytics that I'm going to be showcasing today, everything can be customized. our stance is, hey, we want to give you an incredible starting point where all the back-end data work is done and you have a starting point with some pre-built dashboards and reports, and now you're just tweaking these dashboards. So keep in mind as we go through this, all the charts can be changed, the content can be changed, the filters, everything can be changed. This is just the starting point. So looking at the CFO dashboard, I have the ability to just take a look at how my business is doing financially at a top level. So what's our sales, our margin, our profit? What's our AR and our AP? What's our return on assets, our liquidity ratios, leverage ratios, et cetera. Below that, there's some supporting information that gives a little bit more details over time. So how's our margin and our sales over time? How's our accounts receivable? And how does that compare against last month or last year? As well as liquidity ratios and how they're trending over time. You'll notice that there are date parameters and there's a company selector here as well. These can be augmented. You can change these. And so if I want to run for a different time frame, I can come in here, choose August, and you notice that it does not take a long time to refresh. Nothing has been cached. This is about the speed that you would expect. If you had multiple companies in your 300 instance, those can be automatically combined. We're looking at just one particular company here. And again, as I mentioned, with Sage Data and Analytics, all of this comes out of the box, but you have a level of interactivity with everything that you see. So if I'm a financial manager and I have some questions on margin, and I can see that November is a low amount, I can see what that number is, and it looks like it's a negative 8.3%. I can interrogate that. Now I can get down to a week view. I could even go further if I wanted, and now getting even down to a day view if I wanted to. You can see that there's really something funny going on with that particular day. We could even get down into the transaction level if we wanted to. Additionally, I can navigate to relevant related reports. So there's built-in navigation within Sage Data and Analytics that makes it easy to figure out where I need to go next. So now I looked at our margin. I want to look at a more comprehensive financial overview so I can look at our income statement dashboard. And what you'll see here is we have a P&L here on the left. We have some benchmark metrics on the right. So we can see how is our margin and how is that trending month to date, quarter to date? How does that compare against last year? How's our margin and our profits comparing against budget? Keep in mind, this budget can be sourced externally. So if you maintain your budget in, say, an Excel file, that data can be brought in, reported alongside your Sage data, and presented here. We are showing, operating profit month over month growth as well as quarter over quarter. So all of this kind of turns on. Now, the P&L that you see here on the left-hand side, think of this as a template. What I mean is that the structure of this is already turned on and ready to go upon implementation, but we fully realize that every company is going to set up their P&L differently. So this is very easy to modify to get to the format that you need. So if you need additional line items and you want to break out certain sales accounts or certain cost of goods sold accounts, you want to have your own calculation or subtotals for those, you can bring those in. If you want to look at companies side by side, you'll see that. And you'll see a little bit later on in the presentation how some of these different views of the P&L can be presented. So just keep in mind. Additionally, however you structure your chart of accounts, we can map to your existing chart, and we can bring in all of that mapping within Sage Data and Analytics. So if you have collapsible menus and say you want to look at, sales and dig into sales and see all the individual sales accounts, you're going to be able to access that with this tool. But the key thing that I think is very important is with Sage Data and Analytics, you have a high degree of trust with the data. And what I mean by that is that any number that you see, you can see the raw details behind it, whether it's on financials, it's sales, procurement, etc. So if I'm taking a look at this and I have some questions on this travel and entertainment expenses, I can just interrogate it. And so I can see exactly what makes up those details. And here's the GL transaction line item detail of exactly what makes up that $38,000 for travel and entertainment. This view can also be customized. Now I've already gone ahead and like kind of stripped out some extraneous columns that we don't need, but you can go ahead and determine which columns that you want. So if you want the whole GL segment, you can include that. If there's other attributes or columns that you need to be brought in, it's up to you how you want this view to be set up. There is a default view that has a lot of these columns if you just want to go ahead and use a default view. But the point is that you can interrogate the data and get down into those transaction details. And you'll also have the ability, even at this level, you could say, hey, I got into these details. I want to run a further analysis. You could even export this information into Excel if that's your desire. Now going back, so we came back up to the P&L. And you'll notice that interrogation ability is on any particular attributes. So if we were looking at, say, cost of goods sold, I'm now looking at the GL transaction line items for all of our cost of goods sold, GL transaction. So again, you can dig right into these details and see exactly what makes up that number. And that's what I mean by having a degree of trust, is that you'll always be able to interrogate and see what actually is behind any of these numbers. Now going back, we're back at the CFO dashboard. We analyzed our margin. We dug into that income statement dashboard to look at a more comprehensive financial overview. But you can continue on with the rest of the dashboard. And depending on what you're looking at, maybe you're analyzing your accounts receivable and you have some questions on that. There is smart navigation again with this as well. So you'll notice that clicking on this gauge allows me to go to that next logical place, which is the accounts receivable manager dashboard. And now I have a dashboard that is purpose-built for managing accounts receivable. Keep in mind, this is not something you have to build. This is something that turns on upon implementation. So this becomes active immediately. And what you get is you have a dashboard that tells you what's open, what's overdue. You can see your aging by bucket, both on overdue and current receivables. You can see which customers have the most amount due. You can see how your customers are paying, what's the average days to pay. And another thing that I think Trey had mentioned earlier in his presentation is that we're including relevant reporting calculations that are not necessarily part of your Sage 300 system. And you'll see some of these are being represented here. So things like average days delinquent, days sales outstanding, etc. So these are some kind of key metrics that we're including automatically with Sage Data and Analytics. If there's ever any questions in terms of how these things are calculated, can easily hover over any one of these things, and I get a nice description that tells me what this is. Obviously, this too can be customized. Now, looking at this AR data, I have a lot of interactivity with this as well. I could zero in on a particular customer just by double-clicking on their particular aging, and now I'm at a invoice level detail of exactly what they owe. Or I could go in and say, you know what, I want to look at a detailed aging report. You'll notice that there's a detailed aging report that's linked in here that gives us our aging buckets across the top, along with the customers on the left-hand side. So here an AR manager could hover over a customer to see a little bit more information. Or if they're working operationally, what I would probably do is sort whichever aging bucket that I'm working, and one that have the worst offenders at the top. And now I have a list of all the customers that I need to go after. And if I have questions on the invoices or need some more detail, I can get to that raw data by just double clicking on it. And here's all that raw transaction line item detail. And this is subledger information that you were able to just dig into. It's a lot of kind of flexibility with getting, looking at the data sort of at a high overview, high summary, as well as digging into those details. And again, we're looking at all aging. If you had a situation where you had multiple companies, you could come in here and then choose which individual companies that you needed to look at. All right, continuing on. So we offer similar flexibility for accounts payable. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but just to highlight that, hey, again, you have a dashboard that's telling you a lot about the payable side of your business, your aging buckets by vendor, your average days to pay, who your top vendors are, and what's the relative statistics against those particular vendors. So what's overdue, and what's your average days to pay? A lot of interactivity as well, so you can get into a detailed aging report on your accounts payable as well. So that's what I wanted to kind of showcase from a financial perspective. There are a lot of dashboards and reports included, other financial reports that we just don't have time to get into. You'll notice if I go up to this top menu for finance, you'll notice that there are other reports and other folders that I could dig into. There's an expenses dashboard. There's other financial statements like cash flow and trial balance, et cetera, that you could dig into. But again, just want to highlight there's a lot there, and we're only kind of scratching the surface when it comes to financials. Now, continuing on, there's other areas that we are providing analytics for. And the one thing that I will say is any data that is flowing into your Sage system, you'll be able to report on it with our tool. But what we provide out of the box is financial reporting, inventory, procurement, and sales. So if we dig into sales, for example, you'll notice that there are a set of folders and reports that I can dig into. And so there's sales order reports here, back order reports, delivery performance. But just like in the financial side, there's these overview dashboards. It gives you a little sample of everything of what's going on. So if I dig into my sales manager dashboard, now I have a sales-oriented dashboard. And again, keep in mind, everything that you see here can be changed. If you don't need countries, you toss this. If you want this to be, maybe it's product groups, you can bring that in. If you need a different metric, that can easily be modified. But with the sales dashboard, again, what I have here is where am I selling? Who am I selling to? Who's my top producers? What items am I selling? How's our sales trending over time? Are there particular months that are less? Looks like January is. And here's one that I like to highlight is how are we treating our customers from a sales delivery perspective? So here is a chart that gives us our delivery performance over time. So you can see what is our perfect order index over time, as well as are we delivering in full and on time. Down below, we have a detailed sales invoice analysis. So this is telling us where our margin is coming from, and are there any returns? We also have a detailed sales order analysis that tells us what's on back order and what are open orders that we have right now. So again, all of this turns on, and there's a high degree of interactivity with this as well. So let's say that we're looking at this information and we want to narrow in on a particular geography. So maybe I want to look at the US, for example. I can click on the US, and now I'm going to get only US customers, the sales reps for the US, what items, and from a sales invoice and sales order analysis, we're just looking at only US level data just by clicking on here. Obviously, I can reset it by clicking off, but that kind of functionality works with the rest of these as well. From a level of trust situation, even on the sales data, if there are questions in terms of how these metrics are produced and what is the detail behind any of these metrics, I can simply interrogate any one of these. So again, a salesperson could come on, log into this dashboard, and if they think, hey, a number should be higher, okay, they can go in and double click on it. Or if they have questions on back order, they're like, why, what's on back order? They can come in here, double click on back order, and now they're going to get a detailed line item view of exactly what's on back order here. And again, all of this can be customized from the colors to the content. But one other customization that I found other customers have done is incorporating other data sets. So one other thing I wanted to mention is the fact that if you have a CRM system, we've had some customers incorporate their CRM data into Sage Data and Analytics. And then what they were able to do is have a dashboard that had their CRM data side by side their actual sales members. So they could see things like leads. They could see leads, qualified leads, etc. They could see their whole pipeline alongside their actual sales metrics. So something to keep in mind that you're able to do with this as well. All right. Continuing on, let's go back. And as I mentioned, there are other kind of detailed reports. There's sales order reports that you can dive into, salesperson back order reports, etc. So there's a lot there. Last out of the box analytics that I'm going to just quickly cover, and then we'll just move on to the second part, which is kind of building your own content. We'll just look at from a purchasing side. So again, we're supporting all the data that's coming out of your Sage ERP system. And when we look at purchasing, you have a dashboard that's really meant to manage the purchasing side of your business. And this is a very aggregate view, but it can get very detailed if you need to. So at an aggregate, you can see what you're spending. You can see how your vendors are doing in a purchase price variance. Are they charging more than what's going on the PO? You can see their particular delivery performance, and are they delivering on time and in full? What's the return issues? You can see which vendors are you spending the most on? What items are you spending the most on? Which locations are spending the most? Now, what I like to highlight here is down here, and I've personally spoken to several customers that have said, hey, getting to this type of data down here, this can take 10, 20 hours to build a report just that shows all this information. Again, this turns on immediately upon implementation. And so here, what I'm looking at is all of our key vendors, how much we're purchasing, what their purchase price variance is, what's their delivery performance, and also what's their cost per invoice. So you can kind of just get a quick glance as to, which vendors you're spending the most on, which of the vendors are performing the best. So there's a lot of information, a lot of content right here available to you. Okay, let's continue on. So this is what I really wanted to cover from an out-of-the-box analytics perspective. We showcase that there are financial dashboards with a lot of drill through and kind of linking capabilities. So you can get into your AR, your AP, you can get into detailed transaction, line detail. We showcase that we apply the same sort of methodology for sales reporting. You have a high-level sales dashboard with the ability to dig deeper. And so you saw that with the example of the back orders. And here on the purchasing manager dashboard, we have, again, sort of a overview of how all your vendors are doing with, again, the ability to get into more details. This is just scratching the surface. I could take hours to go through all of the analytics and dashboards that we have, but I wanted to just highlight some sort of the key ones. With that said, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to pivot over to, the reports building experience. And so what I want to showcase is, everything that you saw here is already pre-built and ready upon implementation. But what if you have a desire to build your own reports? What does that look like? So let's switch over. Okay, so now you'll notice that the screen that I'm in is a little bit different. This particular screen is really meant for someone that would be building dashboards or changing the data structure. So if they wanted to bring in additional data, maybe it's Excel data, maybe there's a CRM system that you want to connect to, or maybe it's a legacy ERP system that you want to merge with your Sage database, you can do that within the screen. But the other thing that you're able to do is just build out reports, and that's what we're going to do. So we come in here and we're going to say, hey, you know what? I want to go ahead and build out a detailed report. And so when we come to this screen, this is sort of your design screen. And what I liken it to is if you've had familiarity with working with pivot tables, then picking this up is not going to be a huge stretch. It's a similar functionality. Similar, but this is all cloud-based, and the data structures are already organized for you. So when I log in and I want to start building a report, a key thing that I want to call out here, and what I personally think is the biggest value proposition of what we deliver, is what you're seeing here on the right. And what we do exceptionally well is we organize all of the data coming from your Sage ERP system. And so we catalog it here on the right. And so now if I'm needing to write a report, all I have to do is come into here and ask myself, what do I need to report on? If I need to run a report on accounts payable, I can come in here, expand this, and now here's all these different columns and pieces of data that I have for accounts payable. I need to access accounts receivable information. Here's all these different calculations that Sage Analytics has prepared for me. This is what we do exceptionally well. So we connect to your Sage 300 system. We know which tables to pull the information from. We know which columns to pull the information from. We know how everything is related. We're adding in calculations. So then what we do is we serve up this view right here. So all of that backend data work is automated, and it's not a long IT process to set up. And now a business user can come in here and start building the reports that they need. So let's take an example. Let's say that we want to build a sales report, and we just want to look at, maybe it's our sales by customers. And so how would we go in and start building this report? So we can come in, we're going to interrogate our sales invoice lines, and we can see here's all these different metrics that I have. So we're just going to drag and drop the elements that we want. So we want our sales invoice amount. So there's our total sales invoice amount. Now we're going to collapse this. And now you'll notice that the blue icons are a lot less. So what that means is that Sage Analytics knows what is related to sales and is only going to highlight the elements that relate. So anything that makes sense. So obviously you could run sales by any one of these attributes. And so we said we wanted customers. And so you could use one of our built-in hierarchies. So if you wanted to use our geography, for example, you could see we have this hierarchy and you can dig into these types of details. Or we just want to look at all customers, which is the case that we want to. So here's our sales by all of our different customers, okay? And now what we also want to do is we want to throw in a couple filters. So we want to be able to choose, this is an aggregate view of all companies. So we want to make it selectable so that you can choose which companies that you want. So we have, these two different companies here. We also want to add in a date parameter as well. So we'll put that in too. We could add in, and again, we could add in as many of these parameters as we need, depending on what the requirements are. It's just dragging and dropping over in terms of what becomes selectable. Now, additionally, maybe what we want to have is a comparison to a different time frame. So here's our sales for 2020 for all companies. But how would this look like versus, say, 2019? And how could we go in and do that? And another very valuable feature of what Sage Analytics allows us to do is do these time comparisons. So rather than having multiple reports, putting them side by side, or complex calculations, it's a few clicks. So I come in here, if I want to have a comparison to the previous year, and click right in this box. There's a time function right here. There's this period of date, and now I have the ability to add in any of these kind of metrics. If I want to look at prior month to date, prior quarter, prior week, or in our case, what we want is prior year to date. We can go ahead, just choose on prior year to date. It's going to ask you, what do you want the prior year date to be calculated on? Just be sales amount. Click apply. And there is a quick and easy way to just go ahead and say, here's our sales for 2020. And here it is for 2019 in a comparison. And obviously at this point, you could come in and, just as in, if you needed to create, say, a variance, you could say, you know what, I want to do sales for this year. We want to do comparison to the previous year. We go ahead and do that. We could call this variance. And there's our variance. Very quick and easy to go ahead and add in. Now, this is very a tabular looking report. It's not, this is not visual in any ways. If I want to make this visual, very easy to do so. And maybe let's say we don't even want to have the variance. We just want to go ahead and just make this just for these 2 months as a comparison. So if there's an element that you don't need, you can just remove it. But to change anything into a visualization, it's just a couple of clicks. You click on chart, and now here is sort of a bar chart of all these different customers and how they compare. We could keep it this way, but I find, looking at sort of customer level data, it's probably a little bit better appealing if we change charts and more like a horizontal bar chart. And again, we could sort this by sort of our biggest customers up on the top. And here's the sales for this year and where were they at last year. So quick and easy report that I just went ahead and built. Now, there are a lot of different visualizations here. So if you're reporting on, if you need a line chart or you want to look at more of like a heat map structure, you're able to kind of change the view of this depending on what your business needs are. So there are a lot of visualization options. But with any of these visualizations, the key thing is, and I always bring back to that argument of trust, is you have a level of trust even on these reports that you're building yourself. So what we do is we're organizing all this data. So no matter how I build the report, every time I'm looking at margin, it is truly margin. Every time I'm looking at sales, it's truly sales. So everyone has a consistent view. But if there's questions on any particular metric, even on a report that I'm building just like this, I can interrogate this. And let me show you what I mean. So let's say that I built this report and I want to make this available to my sales reps. And I want them to be able to dig into these details. So you saw the action of just building this report. It only took a few clicks to do so. When I go ahead and enable this for them, we're just going to give this a name of we'll just name it. We'll call it Sales Comparison Report. So I went ahead and built this. Now my sales reps can come in here. They'll have a link to this dashboard. And so this would be the view that the sales rep would have. And now as a sales rep, I could come in here. I could choose if I want to look at 2019. We don't have data for before that. So obviously I only have that. Or I could come into 2020. Could focus on particular items if I wanted to. But let's say that I'm looking at this and now I have some questions on, say, this Acme plumbing. Again, as a salesperson, I can double click into that. And now I have those details of exactly what makes up that information. So this turns on, again, automatically out of the box. All right, so that's what I wanted to cover off from a report building. There's a lot of things you can get very advanced with this. So you can build out key dashboards. You can make, have 4 visualizations even on a report, or you can keep this kind of like, again, get to what you need just based on just a few elements of just dragging over on what you need. Now, last part that I want to talk about, and it's two different areas, is distribution of these different types of reports, as well as being able to leverage additional data sets. So let's talk about distribution. So one thing that you notice is that when I built this report, I saved this, and then there was a link. So one way that this data can be shared is this gets published to this particular portal. And so then they can just navigate to this portal and into this particular report. They could use a direct link to this report as well. Additionally, let's say that it's a one-time analysis that just needs to be shared. You could go ahead and say, you know what, I just want to email this out. You could email out this particular report with a link. You could obviously convert this into a PDF if you needed to, Excel type data as well. So you can export this out. But what I wanted to draw your attention to is the ability to set up like an automated distribution. And so let's say that you have this requirement that every Monday, a set of reports has to be delivered. Maybe it's financial reports that need to be delivered, say, every Monday. You can set up what's called a report pack. And so I have one here. And so this report pack basically is a collection of kind of key financial reports that we want to get set up on an automated distribution. So this can be set up on a schedule that every Monday at 9 a.m. this gets delivered. And it's a set of all these different reports. And the result of that distribution is you can format it in such a way where it's highly tailored to your business. So there's an intro page here. You'll notice that we embedded one of those, that CFO type dashboard. We just changed the color scheme here. But we also embedded in P&Ls, and these are customized P&Ls where we changed the color scheme and we broke it out by individual companies. And so this can be something that gets set up on an automated distribution. You'll notice that you have the ability to have like paragraph text, again, with key metrics that happen for a particular month or particular year that you want to draw attention to. And again, another way of presenting this information of the P&L looks like it's a different month that we're presenting here, as well as sort of a month-over-month view of the P&L presented this way. So this is just sort of different views of how that P&L can look. But the bottom line is you can bring all these together in one report pack ready for distribution. Last thing that I want to talk about is the external data sets. So everything that we've showcased today has been on Sage data. That's data being sourced from the Sage system. And so if we look at this, all of these data points are being sourced from Sage. But what if you have the need to bring in data from other sources? What can you bring in? So as an example, I'm going to highlight all the different data points that you're actually able to connect to with Sage Data and Analytics. And it's a wide amount. So you notice that there are obviously Sage systems here, but there's also the ability to connect to like SQL Server, obviously Excel and CSV data. But there's also a high degree of interactivity with many other data sets. So, if, you know, we talked about other ERPs. If the situation where there's legacy ERP data, we may have a connector for. As well as we have the ability to actually connect to API data. So if you have, say, Shopify data or some other kind of web-based information that you want to connect to, we can connect to it, bring that in, and report it alongside your Sage data. You'll see that there's support for different CRMs as well. So we have basically, I always kind of say, if the data is structured in some sort of tabular way, we can connect to it. And then you would have, you know, this sort of view of that other data, that other system that you're connecting to, and you'll be able to report on it right here. So that's what I wanted to cover off today. Again, you know, there's a lot of dashboards that turn on out of the box. We only kind of just did a quick walkthrough of a few key ones. We showcased how easy it is to build reports. It's literally dragging and dropping over the elements that you need. We talked about how this information can be distributed. There's a link that can be shared. You can email this out, or you can set up an automated distribution, a subscription. So anyone can just automatically receive the information. And then finally, we're not limited to just Sage data. We are able to connect to a wide array of systems and be able to provide this reporting interface. Hope you enjoyed the demo, and Trey, I will turn it over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Rich. And we'll kind of revisit the slides here momentarily. And I know there's a lot of good questions out there, so we'll make sure that we get to them as quickly as we can. And for those of you that maybe have not yet entered questions, we encourage you to do so. But let's just take a moment. I think this relates a little bit to some of the questions in terms of the packaging and the approach that has been taken. So basically, there are 3 different packages that are available. The commercial side of this, pricing and otherwise, we just highly encourage you to talk with your Acumen account managers, after the session. But we wanted to help you understand that the packaging is such that if you're an organization that has a smaller number of companies or a smaller number of users, or is only interested in the financial elements, then the standard plan is really a great place for you, and it's a great place to start. A lot of organizations that we interact with are typically looking at the advanced plan as their starting point, because it does support a larger number of companies. Does support more users. So in this case, this 10 consumers can actually be taken all the way up to 15 if are needed. Furthermore, you'll notice some data sizing across here. This data sizing is not the size of your ERP database, but rather the size of the amount of data that gets uploaded to the cloud. So even if you were sitting there with a 50 or 80 gigabyte ERP database, we're only typically extracting 20 or 30% of the data from that database. So that 50 gigabytes, ends up looking a lot more like 15 gigabytes, and so on and so forth. The module side of this on the advanced plan, not only do you get the GL and the AR and the AP analytics that Rich was able to show, but you're also able to get the sales, purchasing, and inventory management analytics as part of the solution. What you'll notice is that there are extras available on both the advanced and premium plan. The data model design basically relates back to if you need to manipulate the underlying data model, say connect to additional data or choose additional data from your Sage ERP that you want to include, then that would be something that would be licensed as an extra. However, if Acumen is doing that work for you, they actually have the rights to make those changes to the data model without you having to license that. Further, there's additional users that can be licensed on both plans. There's additional data source connections. So as Rich was kind enough to show the SQL Server, the other ERPs, the web-based data connectivity, all of those would be considered additional data source connections. You do have the ability to point to Excel and CSV without having to license additional data sources for those, but otherwise you would be licensing additional data sources for that purpose. Premium plan, we do have some customers that typically come in, typically about 1 out of every 3, because either they have a larger number of companies, they have more data sources that they want to connect to, they have a larger number of users that they want to work with, all of which would be kind of drivers towards that premium plan. What's really great is that Acumen is in a position to not only talk with you about, further about this plans and, certainly the pricing and those things, but further able to kind of get you pointed at some resources. So there's eBooks that are available that allow you to understand, what the plan is comprised of. There's also copies of all of the analytics for those of you that don't necessarily have a photographic memory for the things that Rich had the opportunity to show, you can actually go back and look and see exactly what's included. And so we would highly encourage that those of you that want to understand this more, again, talk to your account manager. They have these eBooks that they can get you pointed to further. They can also talk with you about the plans and the commercial side of them. But for the time being, we do want to make sure that if you have some questions that you get those into the chat window. And if you have a need to post questions kind of after the event, you'll notice the email address and the phone number that's there. I know the Acumen team would very much like to hear from you, regardless of whether it's a question for today or a question that's a little bit outside the scope of this conversation. We would encourage you to reach out to them. So with that, I don't have the ability to get into the questions myself. So Stephen, we want to kind of review some of the questions and answers, and then as we kind of get towards the end of those, we'll just move to the last couple of closing slides?
Yeah, so let's go ahead because we had a few questions that came on in during the presentation, so we can go ahead and get started. One of them that came in, it says, do you have a dashboard providing a global view of data per company?
So all of the dashboards, and Rich, you keep me honest here, but all of the dashboards have the ability to filter based on the company itself. So in other words, as Rich showed the CFO dashboard, as you looked at some of the others, typically they have a drop down that says, I want to look at a singular company or I want to look at all companies. Further, built into the software is the ability to do things like currency conversion. So for some of you that are possibly operating with companies that maybe are operating in a different default currency, you can actually support that currency conversion into a standard reporting currency, say US dollars, and be able to see those US dollars across the board. Further, that currency conversion, for those that are interested in it, is a bit more sophisticated in terms of its application. It does respect the traditional accounting rules in terms of kind of how you manage certain elements of it. So if that's kind of a key point for you, it would be a great discussion point for after this call. But we do absolutely have support for the data per company dashboard type view.
Thanks, Trey. Another question we had says, could we receive a copy of this demo, which I could answer? Yes, we'll be posting this on our YouTube channel. Usually it takes a few days to do video edits, but if you do want a link to this video, reach out to your account manager and they should be able to provide that for you. Another question that came in, can we pull in outside data sources, for example, Google Analytics?
Yep. We can do, but Rich, do you want to talk to that specifically? And if not,
I'm on mute. Sorry about that. Yes, we absolutely have a connector to data to Google Analytics. Not a problem. We can bring that in.
Perfect. Another question came in. It says, I do not see a days payable outstanding on the AP dashboard. Do you have that?
Yes, we do.
Perfect. Another question. Can you filter data based on user? Same report, but one user can see the data of sales department and the other user can only see the data of maintenance department, but the report is one and the same report.
Yeah, so with Sage Analytics, we have what's called row level security or content level security. So it's exactly to address that type of use case. So you can say if a particular user only has access to a particular department, you could say, hey, regardless of the report that the user runs, they will only see data that's related to that particular department. So yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and Rich, I might carry your example one step further. So say you have a sales team and, you have accounts that are limited to, one salesperson versus the other. You also can have that same kind of concept really across all of the data. So for example, if Rich and I are both on the same sales team, I pull up the sales dashboard, I see the data related to my accounts. Rich pulls up the exact same dashboard. Because of that integrated security, he sees the data that's only related to his accounts.
Perfect. So it looks like we have two more questions, and then we can go ahead and move on. One question is, does this look or work differently in Intact versus Sage 300?
Good question. Yeah, so the connectivity is very similar in terms of kind of the capabilities of what's being sourced. Furthermore, we're working really closely with the Intact team so that all of the analytics are very portable between Sage 300 and Sage Intacct. So at the moment, probably looks just a touch different, but here within the scope of a few months, it's going to be exactly the same.
Perfect. And then another question is, when creating a report, can I pull info from multiple areas like AR, and then pull info from inventory module or compare sales reports to the GL to verify integrity?
Yes, we're like a purchasing manager's dream, right? Because so often they're presented with a solution that says, "Hey, go pull from the sales ledger, go pull something else from the inventory ledger, pull something else from somewhere else within the ERP," and then they're either doing Excel magic or something to kind of bring that data together. We absolutely are providing a reporting platform across all of your data within your Sage ERP, meaning that if you want to blend analytical content that is a combination of metrics from sales and inventory and other activities that are going on within the business, you can absolutely do so on a single report, not only for the purposes of kind of validation, Stephen, but also for the purposes of just simply, you have to look across those areas of the business to drive a decision. And so that's something that we do very much by default, and it's a strength of our platform.
Perfect. And then we'll take one more question. It says, can we pull the Sage data into our own Power BI dashboards?
Oh, good question. Yeah. So there's nothing proprietary about the way the data is stored, and at that most elevated level, the premium plan, there's actually support for connecting Power BI into that data store, so that you can very much use Power BI as an alternate way of presenting the data to your business. And that's why we believe so strongly in the data side of Sage Data and Analytics, is you have to have a consistent data platform. And then however you choose to look at the information is really your organization's discretion. But we obviously have some out of the box capabilities, but we also don't want to look past investments that customers may have made already around Power BI or other like tools.
Perfect. And that's all the questions we have for now. So we can move on to the next slide.
Yeah, no, probably a good one to move on to, because with all those questions, clearly, there's some folks that probably want to understand this a bit more. Maybe we want to go so far as to take a look at their own data within Sage Data and Analytics. And so this is something that we're working really closely with the Acumen team. This is obviously an offer that's somewhat limited in scope. And so it'll be provided very much on a first come, first served basis. Something that you really want to go ahead and somewhat quickly reach out to your account managers so that they can kind of manage this with you. We love to talk data. We love to talk data to you as organizations that are running Sage 300. And we certainly hope for the opportunity to at least work with a subset of you in terms of looking at your own data within Sage Data and Analytics to support your decision if Sage's data analytics is the right platform for you.
Perfect.
And so, Stephen, I think at this point, I know you wanted to get some feedback from the audience.
Yes, I can go ahead and launch the poll. Give me 1 second.
Yeah, great.
So if you can see on the screen, it says, based on what you learned today, would you like us to, it's A, contact you about purchasing the product, B, arrange a product demo for your company, C, send you further information and then follow up, or D, let you consider the solution for now. So I'll give it a few seconds and then we'll go ahead and wrap up. Give it about 5 to 10 more seconds.
Stephen, this is such a great way for those folks that have participated in the webinar to really give you kind of, as an organization, a sense of direction about what their interest level is with Sage Data Analytics. And as we said on the last slide, reaching out to your account management team to if they're really passionate about that special offer, but more so giving a little bit of guidance here is important.
Yes, we got some good results overall. So thank you all. I'll go ahead and wrap up. So if you guys do have any additional questions or like more information, then please reach out to your assigned account manager by emailing us at am@acumenfl.com or give us a call at 407-965-2411. Please be sure to contact us as soon as possible if you're interested in Zap's special offer for Sage Data and Analytics. We will also be recording this webinar. Sorry. So if you haven't yet, please subscribe to our YouTube channel for the latest Sage content. We expect this video to be posted in the next few days. With that said, I believe that's all we have for you today. So thanks for joining us. Thank you, Zap, for the great presentation, and we look forward to seeing you all again on our next webinar Wednesday.